Hi, you're listening to the podcast The Drier, the Satire, the Louder, the Choir, with Irina and Jonathan.
Hi, you're listening to the podcast The Drier, the Satire, the Louder, the Choir, a podcast made in the framework of the international cooperation between Howest University of Kortrijk in Belgium and the University of Novi Sad in Serbia. We are Jonathan Mettepenningen and Irena Kukovic. This podcast was made in cooperation with our colleagues Anna Stojanovic, Sebastiaan van Praat and Liam van Haverbeke. We're bringing you a story on similarities and differences between Belgian and Serbian satire. Does freedom of speech mean the same for both countries? Where does hate speech start? What do our two countries most laugh about? Is satire drowning in a sea of intolerance? These are only some of the questions that we will discuss in this podcast together with our interviewees.
From a historical point of view, satirical content is of great importance for understanding the spirit and time of people. We learned about many phenomena that were current in the society from comedians, satirical magazines, and caricatures. Although satire is usually meant to be humorous, its greater purpose is often to provoke social criticism and is used as an instrument of political struggle. Serbia and the Balkans are a fertile ground for satirists and people who, through jokes, not only relive everyday life but also speak briefly about socio-political opportunities and their bearers. There is no doubt that freedom of speech and expression is in direct correlation with satirical content. Even though the Constitution guarantees us right to freely express our thoughts about anyone, censorship and marginalization of undesirable voices and opinions that do not suit the current authorities are a common occurrence in Serbia. In a country where scandals, affairs, and outbursts of politicians and other officials take place almost on a monthly basis, satirists and comedians never lack work. Because of that, ridicule of politicians and their actions are the most common type of satire in Serbia. When a group of men broke in and threw tear gas at an exhibition of caricatures New Age in October 2020, the public of Serbia and its officials did not condemn this act, but the caricatures themselves. And this wasn't an isolated event. It is known that through various regimes throughout history, as well as the present, discreetly or indiscreetly, wanted to silence any form of critics. A few years ago, an exhibition of caricatures by Dusan Petričić and Predrag Koraksić were removed from the library by local authorities in less than 24 hours since its opening. When we consider the above, we must ask ourselves how far can freedom of speech go before it becomes unsuitable.
On the other hand, the Belgian media landscape is quite open to satire. The public broadcasting company has a well-watched program, The Ideale Wereld, which is dedicated to satire. Also, in a lot of quiz shows, we include satire to make it more of a leisure program instead of a pure quiz. Almost all of our magazines and newspapers have cartoonists who work for them and daily make cartoons about the current affairs. They use it to challenge the powers, and instead of solely having critique on people, they also want to raise questions about dilemmas in society. One of Belgium's most famous stand-up comedians, Alex Agnew, is known to be quite hard during his shows. He uses his comedy shows not only to be critical for our politicians, but also to raise awareness about minorities. Those minorities are often misunderstood, so he raises questions about them, and he also says what he doesn't understand about them. By ridiculizing the misunderstood topics, he tries to enlighten them. Because those people belong to our society, have the same rights as majority people, and should be understood. The actual worst thing to happen to satire in Belgium is the Carnival of Aalst being removed from the UNESCO Heritage List. That's because they laughed with Jews, which remains a difficult subject because of the Holocaust, and we have an important population of Jews in Belgium ourselves. But in general, us Belgians are quite tolerant to satire. It's part of our culture, and every media outlet publishes satire without any repercussions.
Related to the topic of freedom of speech in satire in Serbia and Belgium, we spoke to Serbian radio host and satirist Daško Milinović, as well as with Belgian cartoonist Lektor. Daško Milinović is known in Serbia for the podcast Daško and Mlađa, as well as for his satirical Twitter account of Zapatodorovich. During the 8 years of his Twitter life, the main task of Zapatodorovich became countering online fascism.
To be quite honest, it was after I left some internet forum that I was a member of. I was really really active and I was really eager to use that forum. I was happy to do it, but after some time, I parted my ways with people writing there, basically with people moderating it. So I needed another, how can I say, some kind of outlet for my web exhibitions. So I made up this persona of this guy who's in the beginning there to mock all these influencers, these, as I call them, fog salesmen, these motivational speakers, these pseudo scientific psychologists, NLP, yuppies, and stuff like that. But over the time, it became more of a account to combat online fascism and nationalism and religious fanatism.
But in August this year, the Twitter account of Zapatodorovich was permanently banned because of allegedly violating Twitter's policies against hate speech. Daško Milinović says that this was a result of organized groups of right extremists reporting his account.
It's been, I think, permanently destroyed by Twitter as a result of organized fascist trolling campaign, directed reports, probably a couple of hundred reports on the same topic or the same tweet. That's how they basically can manage to put down anything they don't like out there, because the very rules of Twitter are just basically faulty, and they leave a lot of space and a lot of ways for actually organized right-wing people or groups or whatever to use Twitter rules against hate speech to destroy free speech. And basically they just use Twitter's hate speech rules to silence people who are there to fight against hate speech, because some technical difficulties. First of all, Twitter doesn't have anybody to review the content in languages that are some kind of, I call them smaller languages, such as Serbian or languages in Balkan area. So if you engage in any kind of sarcasm or irony or anything, the automatic Google translates just don't get it, and people who review it just don't care or don't want to look into it any further. So Zapad is, after 8 years and really a lot of tweets and a lot of effort put into it, is basically erased, and everything I've ever written on Twitter is gone forever.
Daško Milinović also says that the tweet because of which his account was permanently banned was much softer way of satire than some of his previous tweets. But right-wing groups that reported his account found a way to represent it as hate speech against minorities. Milinović also points out the importance of social networks having administrators for small languages like Serbian, as well as the importance of understanding the national and political context of a country. You cannot use Google Translate for understanding satirical content.
The tweet that I was banned for permanently was even softer than these things I posted before. It was basically what they did. The group of organized right-wing activists, Chetniks, especially from Montenegro, it was in the wake of the election in Montenegro. They were targeting me. It was a huge, really well-organized right-wing campaign to get Serbian nationalists in power in Montenegro. And there were really thousands of permanent and troll and bot accounts were opened in the wake of these elections. And it was basically they reported. This was so great. I called for I don't know if it's possible to translate it like really directly into English, but my call for elimination of fascists, they used as I said Chetniks should be eliminated. You know who Chetniks are, and they basically used that. They reported me to Twitter as if Chetniks were a national minority. And Twitter told me that I was calling for elimination of ethnic or minority group, which was hilarious. But it resulted in a permanent ban, and I could not tell them who Chetniks were, what they are, what they stand for. They're not a minority. They're not a special. It's not an ethnic group. It's a political movement allied to Nazis and blah blah blah. I just didn't care.
Clearly, the situation for satirists in Serbia is not the easiest environment to work in. But we also spoke to a Belgian satirist, Lecter. He is published as a cartoonist daily in the Belgian newspaper De Standaard, and through his syndicate, which is a group of individuals combined to promote a common interest, his cartoons are published almost all over the world.
I'm completely free to do whatever I want. So whatever. I mean, it has to be related to the news of that day. So I'm free there. My spot in the newspaper is my spot. I can send in whatever I want, and they consider me a columnist of some sort. So I can do what I need to do. But abroad, that's different. I can tell that it's way more difficult to publish in the United States, for instance. I mean, my syndicate got cancelled back there. The entire syndicate of 50 plus cartoonists got cancelled because of one cartoon. Yeah, the media is bipartisan there. You have the Democratic newspapers, you have Republican newspapers, and a cartoonist is his entire career pro-democratic or pro-Republican, which is rather weird because in my career I've been anti-socialist, anti-nationalist, every time a different person is in power, you're laughing at that person. But American cartoonists, when a Republican is the president and you're a Republican cartoonist, you're basically still making cartoons about the Democrats who are in the minority. So that's a really weird way of making cartoons. But also there are a lot of other limitations over there. You can't laugh at any kind of religion in the United States. I mean, we're all Charlie Hebdo. You can't laugh at the prophets or anything like that in Europe, and we should be able to laugh at anything. But you can't make a cartoon about Jesus in America.
Satire is more than just laughs, funny drawings, and ironic messages. It's a means to put pressure on political instances and ask questions they don't want to hear in an implicit way. It's a way of challenging the human mindset to think further than merely literal information. We asked both Lecter and Daško Milinovic about the tolerance for satire in their country. The media landscape and demographic situation of both countries are very different.
The world has changed a lot. I entered cartoonism 20 years ago as a student, but before that I was already publishing as a kid. I've been publishing since I was 11. So I've seen publishing change. So I've seen the rise of social media. And before, when I started out, when you wanted to confront a cartoonist with his ideas, or with your ideas that you didn't agree with a cartoon, for instance, you'd have to write a letter. You have to buy a stamp, write a letter, send it or email it to someone. And nowadays with social media, you get a one-on-one confrontation with your reader every single day. And that's also with anonymous readers. So you don't have to you can be very nasty these days on the internet without having to face any consequences. So that's a power dynamics. I had no idea when that would be the case when I started out. When I started out, I just wanted to make funny drawings. and now you're in the trenches as a cartoonist every single day.
Lecter also explains why Belgians are so tolerant for satirical humor.
These days, I mean, you can publish about anything about religion and get away with it, but Belgium is, I think, at least Flanders is way different than the rest of the world in that regard, that we have always been laughing at people in power because we've always been ruled by people that weren't our own people. We've been governed by the Germans, the French, the Dutch, the Austrian, the Spanish. There's always been a different ruler here. So even in the 1920s and the 1930s, there was comedy about religion here in Belgium. So it's always played a big part. Satire has always been a part of our lives. And you can see that whenever there's a big amount of stress, both politically or society, like now with Corona, you can see that people start making their own funny jokes and cartoons and to send them to each other. That always has been like that. That hasn't changed in 50 or 60 years. So back when people were more religious, they would also joke about priests. and I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that's not the same anywhere else in the world. Mm-hmm. And so it's a solid ground for us. We have a really good soil almost for satire. We get away with a lot, mm-hmm. and we get away with it easily. I mean, you can even tell when politicians cross a line. They say, "Well, it was only satire. It's only a joke." You can see when extremist right wings when the police did the Hitler greeting thing with the arm. They said, "Well, it was satire." So we often refer to satire as, well, it was just us joking around. Everybody's a satirist in Belgium, I think.
When being asked about the topics people most often laugh about, Serbian satirist Daško Milinović says that there are some topics that are universal for satire all over the world.
I think it's the same in all around the world, just in different in measure. So religious topics are the ones that can bring you the biggest laughs and the biggest threats to your benefit. So just like in the religious people are theocrats. Basically, theocrats are not known for their sense of humor, and they believe that there are things that you shouldn't joke about, and that you should be punished for questioning some of their authorities. On the other hand, it's the one that can bring you the most attention and the most laughs from the people who are, free-minded and who are like the lovers of free thought and free expression. Also, people like to. There are stereotypes. People like to mock stereotypes. Sometimes it's completely impossible not ever to engage in laughing at stereotypes. Some of the stereotypes are even true, so that can be always a source of humor. But you can tell a difference between a cheap joke that's aimed at just hurting somebody, targeting somebody, and basically when a joke is used as a mean for some kind of a right-wing political agenda, and where, as I say, they're used there really. It's bad humor. The quality of that humor is really low. It's not even funny.
Milinović also pointed out the significance of the freedom of speech and freedom of criticism, especially when it comes to religion.
There is no freedom without your freedom to criticize religion, which, of course, in my opinion, is still the biggest enemy of reason and human progress. And all of the other political evils come out of religious dogma and religious activism, so say. I think freedom of speech is, for me, there's a difference. I would never try to. How can I say? I don't like when laws and states and whatever their institutions may be intervene in the domain of people's tastes and what people say and what people prefer or not prefer. That's where I don't like it, and therefore I really like American way of dealing with the First Amendment way of dealing with freedom of speech. That means you're free to say whatever you want. You're, of course, not free to act the way you want, because if you act upon in any violent manner, you should be stopped, of course. But saying what you want, and there's a big difference. People who now mourn and bitch about so-called cancel culture are confusing the right to say stuff with the right to an audience. It's not the same thing. So if basically you're saying things that are not well received by people, people have the right not to listen to you, not to support you financially, not to give you. You don't have guaranteed platform to say the things you want to say. But basically, you shouldn't be forbidden from saying things you want to say. In that sense, I think freedom of speech should be unlimited.
Belgian cartoonist Lecter certainly agrees on the importance of protecting the freedom of speech, but also points out that it mustn't be abused.
Freedom of speech is really important to me, and freedom of speech should be important to anyone. But I still think that it should be punishable for politicians to straight out lie with factual lies. So that's a big difference. And the line is really thin there as well. And it's a more important discussion to me than should we abolish hate speech, for instance. I mean, I'm pretty sure that a community that relies on facts, where facts should be holy. For instance, we can do that. We've done it with denying the Holocaust. I mean, people that deny the Holocaust can be punished. Why can't we have the same kind of rules around? I mean, I'm not a politician. This is giving answers again. I'm more of the questions kind of guy. But we should ask ourselves, as a community, can we withstand hate speech? I mean, hate speech is out there already, all the time, all over the place. And I'm pretty sure that in a debate, we can manage ourselves into a sensible community, a sensible society where hate speech lives in the fringes. I mean, if you abolish it, if you say you can't say it, it won't go away from people's minds. I mean, people like Sam van Rooij won't change because a law says, well, you can't express that kind of racist ideas anymore. If these laws exist, he will probably go underground, as you see with people who deny the Holocaust now. They rent small town halls, and then they have meetings there, and where they sell swastikas and Nazi paraphernalia. So it's not because that they're no longer allowed in the public debate that they are no longer thinking this way. It's even more dangerous this way because when they go underground as a society, you no longer have control about it. You can no longer debate them. You can no longer say, well, actually, what you think is really wrong because of this and that and this and that. And every now and then, people that are floating towards racism or floating towards denying the Holocaust can be talked to reason with if you just. The more these extreme ideas are being marginalized, the more they get the extinct idea, it's them against us. So we have to allow it into the freedom of speech and say, well, I don't agree with you, but I defend with my life for you to say whatever it is that you're saying, which I don't agree with. But I will defend that. But I'm pretty sure that Mr. Van Rooij doesn't mean that he will actually defend it, because there are a lot of stats that he would like to abolish. So.
On the press freedom ranking, Serbia ranks 66th, according to media specialized website Media Landscapes. Satirist and radio host Daško Milinović is of the opinion that Serbia has high-quality satirical content and that satire is a good way to encounter religious fundamentalism and nationalism.
Satire is it's an art form for me. So basically, just like with any other art form, there are people who are good at it, better at it, worse at it, shouldn't be doing it. And when it comes to Serbian satire scene, there's a bit of everything of everything of those I mentioned categories. There's really bad one. There is a right-wing satire which is not funny at all. There are these people who call for relentless mocking of somebody based on their race, religion, nationality, and in the same time are basically calling for anyone who does any satire of their religion or nation to be arrested, prosecuted, hurt, killed, or whatever. That's of course bullshit. But when you look at what's offered at right now at the satire buffet of Serbia, there are pretty good ones. There are also it's also a matter of personal taste. I tend to incline more towards cheeky and tongue-in-cheek style of. But also sometimes, like, there's Simpsons and there's South Park, as I always like to say. I think we need both, and especially in times like these, where these reactionary forces, especially from the religious corner of the public sphere, are corner of the sphere. I think that's not even possible, but are gaining ground and trying again to take control over our lives and what we can laugh at or say or mock. It's our duty as free people to mock them more and not to show any kind of fear, especially in Serbia, where you are basically whenever you try to exercise your free speech and you're anti-nationalist or anti-religious whatever tone, you are prosecuted by the state, by the police, by para-police organizations, right-wing thugs who work for the government or the police, and church with its bunch of same how can I call them? Well, this church, just like the state, uses also a bunch of methods to suppress you and intimidate you.
In October 2020, in Serbia, a group of men broke in an exhibition of caricatures by our most famous satirists and demolished all of its art. Daško Milinović sees this as the beginnings of fascism in Serbian society. If we debate about whether the art we don't like should be destroyed, it's fascism.
You can tell that all of these examples of violence in public sphere, all of these intolerant attacks are basically always have their roots in teachings and in acts of Serbian Orthodox Church and its child Serbian nationalism. This was a pure and open display of fascism in its purest form, where you are basically breaking and entering into somebody's mind or into somebody's words, deeds, creations, to destroy them in order to forbid others from consuming it. So it was a classical example of what Nazis used to call a degenerate art. It was their way of showing that there are things that shouldn't be shown to people according to their ideology, and what shouldn't be, what people shouldn't hear or see, and they are the ones who are to decide what is that. So this was the example of just basically street stormtroopers storming into a forbidden exhibition and dealing with it in the only way they know. So it was basically it was scandalous, and it was really appalling to see the official state institutions such as the Ministry of Culture and Information basically not endorsing the attack, but saying that they're not surprised that the attack happened, and basically sharing the blame for the attack, calling the victim and the attacker, then boosting the public opinion, swinging toward that there are some there is the degenerate art, and there are some times where it's necessary for offended people to violently react to it. That is very dangerous, and that's a sign of really sick society that's really submerged into conservatism, violent brand of conservatism dominated by religious ideology. There is no justification for those things, and my heart and soul and everything I had is on this side of artists. And I mean, when we speak about it's already some kind of a right-wing victory when we are to discuss the content of exhibition.
Milinović, as the main problem, recognizes that state institutions don't intend to fight right extremism. So satirists and everyone else criticizing the politicians and the society are left on their own, without an institutional or police protection.
We had to ask Belgian cartoonist Lecter if he would be a satirical cartoonist in such a country.
Starting, no. I mean, in Belgium, we're really... I mean, when I got in trouble with death threats and stuff like that, the police was actually on my side. And a lot of cartoonists all over the world don't have that. I mean, for often, the police is just the extension of the politics and are a part of the problem. In a lot of parts of the world, cartoonists fear the police and can't make any cartoons about police. I made fun of police officers today in the newspaper. I mean, I think 70% of any cartoonist around the world isn't able to do that. So I'm well aware that my situation is very privileged. And I hope it will stay that way, because I felt political pressure as well. I felt political intimidation as well. Not in the same kind of that he's faced in the past, luckily. But since Charlie Hebdo, people also here got more aware of cartoons. Before that, I told you earlier, they were innocent. Mm-hmm. And now it's part of the political system, almost. So, yeah, I wouldn't. If I had to start out right now, and I would be in his situation, I wouldn't start. No, I probably wouldn't. It would be interesting to make underground cartoons or something like that, but I wouldn't try to make a career out of it, because it's almost impossible to be an interesting cartoonist in a state-owned media landscape, and also have constant political pressure, thrown in jail and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure that's not some place I'd like to work in. No.
Being a satirist is not the safest profession, either in Belgium or in Serbia. Both of the satirists at some point were exposed to death threats because of the content they created. Milinovic says that he doesn't feel safe as a satirist in Serbia and adds that this kind of profession wears you out sometimes.
As an anti-fascist activist, which I always consider myself to be in the first place, whatever I do is that's just the way it is because I was born in this time, this place. So anti-fascism is really number one thing I do socially. I mean, it's kind of I didn't want my life to be that way, but if you must always be on the lookout, and it's just some kind of a vicious circle. The more you, or a Godfather 3, even if you try to get out of it to stop any kind of activism, they just pull you back in because of what they do, and you don't want to surrender to them, and you don't want to surrender them. That's basically it. And as such, you get used to, you gotta grow thicker skin, and you gotta be ready to you have to get ready for any kind of backlash from that, be it public humiliation, slander, right down to physical attacks and physical harm. But that, I would say, in the last 8 years, ever since this regime took power, it's been much worse because now your enemies used to be just some kind of still. They used to be some sort of political extremists. Now you get constant police harassment. I get called by the police every 6 months. They just keep the tensions up. They let you know that you're being constantly watched. They keep telling you that you are basically the enemy. They try to get you to leave the country, to stop doing what you're doing through subtle and not so subtle methods. So yeah, it's basically very very shitty public life if you try to be on what I see as the right side of history.
Yes, it is not the best profession in Serbia.
It's not the best way of life.
Safest.
Yeah, it's not the best way of life. Let's put it that way. It's very dangerous, and it wears you out. I sometimes feel like I'm really just worn out, burnout, whatever. These police harassments are the worst.
But still, you have chosen that way of expression, and you didn't give up from it.
Yes.
So the question is, what does satire mean to you?
Well, it means a lot to me. It's not a satire, and that's just a satire. I'm a great admirer of freedom. Freedom is what I'm after, and I believe in people's right to live freely as much as possible. I believe in people's right, in people's basically given by birth given rights to be free, to act as and free individuals.
Even though Belgium is considered to be a more liberal country than Serbia, there too satirists can be endangered by death threats because of their work.
Most of the time you don't know if a cartoon is going to get a good reception or not, and this one was exceptional in that way that it went viral in over 40 languages. I saw it pass by in Taiwanese media and stuff like that, so I had no control over it anymore. Which was interesting, but at the moment I had no clue that it would also get negative press. I mean, there was a lot of positive vibe around that cartoon. Everybody was using it on TV and in media as a symbol of resilience against that cartoonists wouldn't quit making good and fun cartoons, even when this kind of threat was happening. So I had no idea. I didn't get more prudent, that's for sure. I mean, the exact moment as I was reporting the death threat to the police was the moment that I had my deadline for the next day. And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe I should be a little bit more prudent. And I was waiting in police office and working on my cartoon for the next day. And they just kept being insulting and and funny. So there's no way for me to leave a good cartoon in my sketchbook and not use it. So I decided to go with it anyway. And I think in the long run, it's almost impossible to find out if I got more prudent or not, but or more insulting. I have no idea. But I think it changed little to the way I work. Or, I mean, there have been more death threats since. There have been more hate mail since from every side of the world and stuff like that. So, but even living with police protection didn't change that much, because as a cartoonist, you're quite anonymous. I mean, that's something you know as a cartoonist, is that people have to put in a lot of effort to find out where you live, how you look. I mean, most of the people I know don't even know that I'm a cartoonist. They just think I'm some kind of guy that doesn't work. I mean, I stay at home a lot and I draw. So people in my neighborhood don't know what I do, for instance. So if you play it well, and the thing with social media especially, and you have to really push the agenda and really go viral before someone with another opinion sees your cartoon. With social tunneling systems and stuff like that, or how do you call it? Self-referential reality tunneling.
Algorithms.
The algorithms. You only get to see the things that you already agree with. So that makes it easy for a cartoonist to get his following, but it makes it extra difficult for a cartoonist to go outside of the bubble. For instance, I got a Chinese death threat, but it took 10 days of Chinese state propaganda before people start to react on the cartoon. The cartoon was in the newspaper and the cartoon was on my social media, but it hardly did anything for 10 days. Then after 10 days, the threat started because of the buzz someone else had to generate somewhere. So to actually get a death threat, you have to go viral, which is difficult, or someone has to really put in the effort or to try and target you.
Yet again, neither Dashko Milinovic or Lecter intend to give up on satire.
Politics and power are very powerful, and satire is the only way to challenge power and politics without being part of it. As people that make satire are often easier hurt than someone who writes columns because of the comedy content of satire. Satire is often funny. And one of the most interesting things about fun and comedy and humor is that it lowers people's bias and thresholds against new ideas. So often you make someone laugh with something, and in the meanwhile, you're inserting a new idea into someone. And that's where satire also, because it's funny, it's also innocent. And that's something before Charlie Hebdo was really big. You could say almost anything in some countries, even in Arabic countries. I've published in Turkey before. Satire was funny, so it was innocent. So you could say really nasty things about politicians, but you weren't taken serious because it was satire. It was only poking fun at someone, and that's the big weird thing about satire, is that it's both very funny and very not serious, but serious at the same time. For me, that's satire. Yeah, I'd be a really lousy politician, and the thing with politics is, and with any kind of power, with multinationals and stuff like that, is that they always come up with solutions. They always have infallible solutions they present to us. If you vote for me, I'm going to solve this and this and this and in that way, and it's going to work perfectly. And it never works perfectly because the reality is way too complex, and cartoonists never give any answers. We only ask questions, and mostly annoying questions. And that's the dynamics between politics and between politics and satire is interesting because of that question and answer dynamics. I think freedom of speech should be without any limits, and I mean that in the most literal way. I think as a society we should be strong enough to even have really stupid, false, hateful ideas among us, and even add them to the debate, because as we speak, for instance, Belgium is a country with a lot of free speech. We have laws that entitle free speech. We also have some laws that say that some opinions can't be expressed. For instance, negationism. You can't deny the Holocaust, which is, if you come and think about it, a pretty sensible law.
Daško Milinović says that satire is an art for him. He is firstly an anti-fascist, and satire is his way to fight for free society. No matter the obstacles he often has to deal with, he still believes in people's intelligence to recognize good satire and good humor, and to confront the right extremism ideologies.
But I believe in people. I mean, I think people are. I don't know why I still believe that. I've been shown many times that I'm probably wrong, but I still believe in people's intelligence to sort out what's funny, what's not funny, what's hurtful, what's smart, what's constructive, what's destructive, and I also believe in people's freedom to think the way to be exposed to different ideas, to be exposed to different attitudes, whatever jokes. And whatnot to tell for themselves.
Lecter actually believes quite the opposite. Satire is built in different layers and has a specific meaning. Due to the rise of social media and the incredibly fast nature of it, people find it harder to understand the meaning or the purpose of a cartoon.
One of the big issues with satire these days is that a lot of people are no longer intelligent enough or no longer willing enough to actually look for the second layer or the third layer of meaning in a cartoon, because most of the times cartoons or satire is really well layered. I mean, there's a lot of extra meaning in it. And sadly enough, with the internet being a really fast medium and with the readership getting less and less focused, I guess. Well, the concentration span has really expanded. So you just scroll through jokes, and you often hardly even get the first layer of meaning. And that's often the people where we get the heat from, is that people, any kind of the spectrum, political or any kind of the spectrum, just go by the idea that a cartoon shouldn't, or satire should always be literal, what it's saying. It can be interpreted literally, but there's a second dimension and sometimes even a third one if you just keep on thinking about it. And that's one of the things that I fear the most, is that at some point people will no longer be able to read cartoons anymore or satire anymore. And that's what we see with, for instance, Spitting Image. There was a lot of discussion on how Greta Thunberg was portrayed, for instance, in Spitting Image, the new series of Spitting Image. But the second layer in Spitting Image is that everybody is, their facial expressions and the facial, the noses are bigger and the eyes are, so everything is enlarged. And by enlarging, of course, the way someone looks, you're ridiculizing them. And somehow the debate turns on people with Asperger and stuff like that, as if you were able to see that in a caricature. But you probably, I don't know, you probably can't, but somehow the discussion went, can you still laugh with someone who is in a minority somewhere? And then the discussion goes sideways, of course, because then you can no longer make Spitting images of people of color. Well, probably not people who are a little bit, you can't body shame anymore. And making a cartoon is often a bit body shaming.
Satire is obviously a sensitive art form. Also, there are cultural differences between Serbia and Belgium and how the public experiences it. Satirists in Belgium and Serbia handle different subjects, and the two societies accept different topics. The political and demographic situation in Serbia influences the satirical content to be more oriented in the direction of critics of politicians. For Belgians, satire seems to be a part of their culture. Either way, we would like this podcast to be the opportunity to ask ourselves how tolerant we are to satire and what are the limits of our freedom of speech, if there are any. You are listening to The Drier the Satire, The Louder the Choir, podcast about similarities and differences in Serbian and Belgian satire. If you are interested in our other media, feel free to check out our websites: Newsroom for content made by students of Howest University and Univerzitetski odjek for stories made by students of University of Novi Sad.